So welcome to the culture for today's video, where we're going to be discussing how you can better look at your approach to rehabbing or improving your shoulder sort of stabilities or shoulder mobility issues in regards to powerlifting, and how we can better take off our powerlifting coaching goggles and look at the gym in a strength and conditioning sense rather than just a powerlifting focused sense, and how we can better incorporate sort of specific, non-specific drills that can help improve the longevity of your powerlifting sort of career. I just want to preface this video by saying that we are not rehabilitation coaches here at Melbourne Strength Culture. If you are presenting with pain or if you have any worries about your shoulders, make sure you go and speak to a healthcare professional, a physio, an osteo, a PT, whoever's in your area, and hopefully they will be able to help you with your rehabilitation strategies to getting back to pain-free lifting. I feel where a lot of coaches go wrong in a powerlifting sense is that they see purely the gym as powerlifting, and that when you walk into the gym that the session has to be powerlifting focused, and that is that if it's not squat, bench or deadlift or an accessory of those movements, it's not actually helping you get towards your end goal of lifting bigger weights. From my experience as a strength and conditioning coach turned powerlifting coach, working heavily with baseballers when I was interning at Cressy Sports Performance, and then also through my developmental years here in Australia through the AFL system and also private sector system, the strength and conditioning approach to powerlifting would be seen as completely different. And that is first and foremost that the gym needs to be an injury prevention or injury reduction sort of viewpoint rather than purely just expression of the skill in the sport itself, being strength training. This is where I see a bit of a missed opportunity for a lot of strength coaches and powerlifting coaches, is that they don't see that the gym can actually be used as injury prevention. And that is, you can use non-specific drills to actually improve the outcome of your sport-specific training, in this sense, powerlifting. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and how we can look at the human body as a whole as a kinetic chain, and how it presents itself as shoulder pain, and how you might be able to adjust some variables in your programming or add some things in or take some things out that may actually be able to help reduce your shoulder pain. This is sort of the putting together of a few ideas that we've already covered on the Strength Culture YouTube channel. So I'm going to link some videos in the description box below that I'd recommend that you check out. I'll also put some thumbnails up for videos that touch on the points that I'm talking about a little deeper. So the first thing that we need to look at when we're looking at a human body as a human sense, not a powerlifting sense, is that the human body is a kinetic chain. And that is that anything that happens downstream will affect what happens upstream, and anything that happens upstream will affect what happens downstream. Before we need to look at anything that's going on with the shoulder, first we need to address what's happening to the foundation of the shoulder, which is actually the rib cage. The rib cage is what the shoulder blade sits upon and where it draws its stability, and the glenohumeral joint draws its stability from the shoulder blade itself. So it's a kinetic chain, a small kinetic chain of the rib cage, setting the foundation for the shoulder blade, which sets the foundation for the glenohumeral joint or the shoulder joint. So the first thing that we need to look at is what's actually happening to the rib cage through our powerlifting program. We've touched on it a lot here at Melbourne Strength Culture, but powerlifting training is heavily extension biased, meaning that a lot of the training that occurs in a powerlifting program draws upon extension moments a lot greater than flexion moments. When we bench, we're in a global extension. When we're squatting, we're in a very upper thoracic extended position where we're holding our shoulder blades in a depressed and retracted position. And then when we deadlift, we're fighting all of that flexion moment by drawing on our extensor muscles. This can cause a very extension bias through the spine, where we've got a heavily anterior tilt and an excessively flat T-spine. We've talked about this before, but there's no issue with being in any of these positions. The issues arise when you don't have the sufficient motor control to pull yourself back into a more neutral position. So when we're stuck in this extended pattern where the T-spine is quite flat and the lumbar spine is quite extended, what that normally means is that the shoulder blade, again, because it sits on a stable position of the rib cage, is not really in a position where it can find a lot of stability. And that is because the shoulder blade is a concave structure. And then when the T-spine is flattened or extended, the concave structure doesn't really articulate too well with that flat surface. What it needs is it needs a concave structure underneath it for it to a concave structure underneath it for it to hug and support and offer stability for the actual bone itself. So that means that our training from a strength and conditioning standpoint and injury prevention needs to have some sort of flexion, protraction, upward rotation movements to help us cue some serratus anterior activation. The serratus anterior sits underneath the shoulder blade, so it will sit between the shoulder blade and the rib cage. And when it is actually activated and working, it can help keep that stability there because it holds the shoulder blade snug on the rib cage. When we have that shoulder blade snug on the rib cage through serratus anterior activation, we actually allow the shoulder blade to be more stable on the rib cage, which allows the glenohumeral joint to be more stable as a result, which allows it to accept and develop forces through our powerlifting movements. So the serratus anterior is going to be a very, very important important muscle, for stability of the entire shoulder complex. We've done a few videos on reaching exercises before, but the main loaded ones that we use here are push-up variations and then also landmine variations. And then unloaded reaching movements that we use a little bit closer to comp in order not to sort of mitigate any pressing volume that we could get from a bench press program. We use back to wall shoulder flexions, forearm wall slides, foam roller wall slides, prone one arm trap raises. All variations of movements that I've learned through my time with Eric Cressy working with very high level baseballers, and how we can apply those sort of reaching and just general shoulder health movements and apply them into a powerlifting sense. So that's a very important thing to understand, that number one, the human body is a kinetic chain, and then number two, how this shoulder blade is sitting on the rib cage is a very important foundation for the actual glenohumeral joint. And when pain is presented at the glenohumeral joint, more often than not, there is some sort of scapulothoracic dysfunction occurring that is presenting this with pain. The last little thing that we need to look at when we're talking about the human body in a kinetic chain, and another great reason why we love reaching exercises, is the lower trap muscle and the activation that occurs when you move through full reaching and protraction and upward rotation movements. The lower trap is the most inferior muscle in the trap complex. It sits down below the spine of scapula, And what it does is it helps us pinwheel that shoulder blade through upward rotation. So when that activates, it sort of allows the shoulder blade to move through upward rotation. What it also does is it helps us posteriorly tilt the shoulder blade. This becomes extremely important when we're talking about the squat and the bench press, where shoulder pain is more often than not presented in a powerlifting sense. When we have the ability to posteriorly tilt our shoulder blades, what we can actually do is we can actually open up space at the front of the shoulder here. If you've ever tried to bench press with your shoulder blades anteriorly tilted and very rounded forward, you'll find that you actually get quite easily anterior capsule pain. So there's pain at the front of your shoulder here. When we posteriorly tilt, get thoracic extension occurring, hold the shoulder blades back and down, we can then move through a greater range of motion without that pain presenting itself. One, because you've reduced the range with a thoracic extension and bringing the chest up. But two, because we've actually posteriorly tilted this shoulder blade, allowing more space at the front of the capsule itself. So the lower trap is an extremely important muscle for you to incorporate in your strength and conditioning program for powerlifting purposes. Again, we've done a video on how you can better activate the lower trap through an isolated and integrated approach of the half kneeling stick assisted lower trap activation drill and the supine band pull apart drill. I'll put the link in the description box below. Here is the thumbnail. But it's another understanding of how the human body moves as a kinetic chain rather than purely just looking at your bench press program for why your shoulders hurt. You need to take off the powerlifting coaching goggles and put on the strength and conditioning and sort of see the program as a whole and how you can adapt the program to better execute strength movements of squat, bench, and deadlift. As I said before, there's plenty of links in the description box if you haven't looked at some of the other content that we have available here on the Melbourne Strength Culture YouTube channel. If you have any comment section, please leave them in the comment section. If you have any comments, please leave them in the comment section below. You can find us through the links in the description box. Be sure to subscribe for some fresh content weekly. And as always, happy lifting and welcome to the culture.